So Quinn, you've been playing tabletop role-playing games for a lot longer than I have. You're an old hand at this. How often do you do what are called session zeros?
I've done quite a few in my time. A lot of my D&D playing has been in person over the past decade or so. I started online, migrated to played in person almost exclusively for a while, and then Dice Funk came back into my life, so I done that. But session zeros, I think, are usually a very important way that I like to play the game, mostly as a way to set expectations.
Yeah, this is what we're doing right now. What you're listening to isn't a traditional session zero because we mostly do that stuff in the Discord we share. But I feel like I want to do something similar.
And also, it's only us.
It's yeah.
Usually, a session zero will have the entire party available.
Well, yeah, I'm saying even in that Discord. So, for last season, I would be like, hey, this season we're doing kind of a space, Star Wars, Star Trek pastiche. The Mind Flayers are kind of trying to be integrated into galactic civilization. That's the premise. But then if you hear in episode 1, I'm like, okay, so this person's a big fan of illithids. And then Leon goes, what's an illithid? So you can't control what people read of your messages or what they absorb without you say. But a lot of the stuff that we do is off the recording, so people don't hear it. Just basic setting ground rules where I'll say things like, I'm okay with pretty much any level of extreme violence and gore, basically above and beyond what even D&D usually tracks in. But there's some things we don't really play with homophobia or racism in an extreme way on our show, for example.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that we set up, and not even necessarily even stuff to that extreme. That is where we'll sort of throw ideas out, and that's where we find out maybe where we're sort of stepping on each other's toes a little bit. Where maybe okay, guys, we have too many goofy, silly weirdos. Maybe one person should be a little bit more grounded.
Yeah, and I think some of the biggest mistakes in the show's history have come when those type of notes have been completely disregarded. For example, if I say, I don't know that this Batman parody is more than a one-episode joke, and then you just do not respond or listen, for example, that could go badly. If you just didn't respect other people, for example.
Yeah, if there was a season of the show where almost no one seemed to take any response to the idea you put forward, and we're just like, you know what, I have an idea that I'm going to go with. You had to cut that out. I can't be this negative and bitchy.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you have to learn about what your players like and get on the same page and so forth. I'm kind of doing that with the audience. I'm going to release this not as session 0, but as part 0 because it's a pre-season 11 thing. And I'm partly building a ramp here because I think I'm going to do this for the next couple seasons leading to season 13, aka codename Pumpkin Season, because Dan has been working on his setting for literally years. So before there, I think I want to sit down with him and literally record, I assume, a much longer episode where we talk about the world he has crafted. But I want to do a shorter one for this one and for next season, which is tentatively Dragon season, I think people know. So that's kind of the plan. But season 11 in particular, people say about Sex in the City, they're like, New York is actually the 5th character. This is kind of this situation where I think the setting is more of a character than it's ever been, and I wanted to talk about it with you. Hopefully this will be a pretty short episode. I know people are still catching up over the holidays. We released a huge finale and all the postmortems, but that's kind of what we're doing this morning. It doesn't matter whenever you're listening to it.
Right now, we are recording this concurrently with when you were listening to this. That's right, you're like, it's 2 a.m, guys. Shouldn't you be asleep? No, we're recording it right now for you exclusively.
We're outside your window. We're not dressed appropriately for the weather. It's very cold. Please let us in.
Also, it looks like you left the tea kettle on. Just a heads up. I can see it from here.
Yeah. Also, we can just talk about general things with DMing, GMing, because this is your first time on Dice Funk. You have obviously DM'd a lot in your life before, but we are, as of this recording, 8 episodes in, so 2 months of recording. So once again, some of this is with hindsight, because you'll hear us say oh, well, how does that work? What's going on with that? In the moment, but now I know because I'm in the future. So those are the sort of things. Has anything stuck out to you in 2 months of season 11?
Yeah, so I'm sure it'll be evident when people listen to the first episode that I was very nervous throughout it. I'm always nervous anytime I do something sort of new for the first time. I was very nervous on my first episode of Dice Funk. I was very nervous the first time I did a one shot. I was very nervous DMing the mini season, the Guns, Puns, and Justice one. I'm just nervous frequently until I get used to it, essentially, which is where I found myself. Like, there was no like stress or anticipation in this most recent episode I had to record, for example. But yeah, I had a lot of stress preparing for that first episode, and that might be evident to some degree. Maybe not. Maybe I shouldn't encourage people to microanalyze every second of the recording. And I'm sure a lot of the nervousness gets edited out to some degree. But there was a lot of challenges to adjust to, even though I've spent a long time DMing. There's a lot of challenges to adjust to DMing Dice Funk in particular. Not the least which being that your DMing style is so incredible that it is very intimidating to try to be like any kind of fitting alternative or replacement or just accompaniment or anything like that. You cast a very powerful shadow.
Well, that's very flattering of you to say. I mean, we all have our strengths and weaknesses, right? So I think for my style, for example, I use a lot less florid description than the average DM might. If you read the books, the way they kind of teach you to DM through the printed published material is always like, you enter the dark, dank tomb, and the moss on the ceiling has a fetid stench that pervades the air. You know, like, I don't do that kind of narration just because, in my experience, players tend to zone out. They their eyes roll back in their head. They start looking at memes. And maybe your group isn't like that. Maybe your group loves that shit and you lean all the way into it. You kind of have to know your players. Like, I joked about Leon earlier. I fucking love Leon. That Bill Webb shit was so fucking funny. But he is not someone who's going to internalize like the complex geopolitics.
The walls are thick with a matted, wet smell. He's just gonna be like, who do I punch and when? When can I kill them?
Yeah, he often just asks, who are the bad guys here? which is fine, because then you just build a setting where I'm like, there are terrorists trying to blow up this ship, and then he's like, I'm gonna go apeshit on them, and that's funny. Dan is like the opposite, where it's like, you can't, if I say like, there's a river in front of you, Dan's gonna be like, okay, so what are the tributaries? Where does it flow from and to? What's the mineral composition? How deep is it? And it's just like, fuck, I didn't prepare any of that. God damn it.
But that's been, I think, for me, a very interesting thing. Because I think one aspect of my side of this season is very much the philosophical question of this season. Not to, I guess, jump too far into what we're talking about, but since this is playing off of season 9's ending and the world they created, the question of how do you decide who to bring back is a question I really want to explore throughout this season. And Dan is an excellent player for that, because he immediately created a character whose like sole mission in life is finding out exactly how this does work, because it is deeply important to his people's culture.
Yeah, Dan is doing a lot. A fear I have, and you're going to hear the first episode next week, so you're not going to have to wait too long, though, is all of our characters are kind of wacky and weird. Like, we don't have any like humans named John, you know? It's it's a pretty out there season. Dan's is maybe the furthest out there, so I hope people like it. But one thing, I think about is like, is this too unrelatable? So I have that fear.
I feel like this is an audience, not to throw in a Magic the Gathering reference that most people won't get, but this is like a Lorwyn heavy audience. They don't need humans around for them to get on board. Usually, like, when there's like a race that's too boring, I hear people kind of push back against it a little bit. Like, I almost felt like there was like a like maybe a sense of like, oh, so it's just kind of like a human like vampire, eh? Oh, okay. Could have been like a bullywog vampire or something like that. Like, you could have gone wild, but I feel like everyone loves when there's like some crazy new race that's like over the top and has lore and, you know, is all sorts of silly, which Dan's is 100%. His character will just drop little nuggets throughout an episode that will like stop the recording still. It'll just be like, yeah, my character never sleeps ever, and in fact, if he tries to, he'll die. And you're like, excuse me, what?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a real one. I think that you might have just made that up.
Yeah, I made that one. Well, I'm trying not to dox his character before they come out. But just the idea that his character has a very weird physiology, and I think that's very fun. I think the audience will like it. The other side of our story is also kind of an eclectic group of weirdos, so I feel like it's, tonally in a similar place. There's like extremes of like, here's the characters who are like really far out there, and I think here are the ones who are going to be more relatable for you, but they're also kind of weird little freaks too, just to be clear.
Yeah, I think in future, if we do like part zeros again, we might bring players on to talk about their characters. I don't know how much we need introductions, because I kind of like to just get in and play. But yeah, we're not going to be touching too strongly on them today. I do want to say, it's like circling back to the Dan stuff, because he is like looming large in my imagination right now. Is that the season 13 stuff is like building a ramp there too, right? Because he's playing a character related to his upcoming setting, and I do still want to keep every season of the show standalone. I want you to be able to start anywhere. So if you skip part 0 and you start episode 1 of season 11, you should be fine. When someone needs to know something, they roll history. That's the way the game works. Like when you sit down to play Dungeons and Dragons, you haven't read every published book since the 70s, like everyone is always kind of having blank spots in the lore stuff. But like, as you said, this season was suggested by the end of season 9.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the starting place. So I will say I kind of want this part 0 to be here. If someone has a question about the setting, they can just load this episode up. It's all here. But also, I want this episode to be skippable. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. I think it's good that we have a little bit of a break here for the audience, because as you said, all of our content just came out over the holidays, including like a 2.5 hour finale. It was obscenely long. So yeah, there's a lot of content there people might be catching up on. And also, if this is your first time listening to season 11, maybe you're in the far distant year of 2033 and you're like, I'm finally going to get around to listening to Dice Funk, where, I don't know, we're presumably on season 37 or something like that. This is hopefully going to be a gentle on-ramp, but if you're like, nah, I get it. I've been binging this stuff. I don't, get me to the action. Hopefully, we've done a good job keeping you on the rails to understand what's happening in season 11.
Yeah, because the players won't have heard part 0 because we're recording it now, so obviously that's not necessary. Also, I do see people, literally today in the Discord, someone was saying, oh, I'm showing the show to someone, they want to start on season 1, which I understand. I always like start everything at the beginning. When JoJo's Bizarre Adventure first got onto my radar, they're like, oh, Stans are in part 3. I'm like, yeah, but Austin is in part 1. So I get...
What?
I get that.
I'm trying to remember. I feel like there was a specific example of something I tried to tell you. I was like, you can actually start a little bit further. You're like, maybe like One Piece or something like that, or something. There was some anime I told you, like, oh, you can skip a little bit forward. And you're like, that won't happen.
That's not how Austin does this.
But I'm such a hypocrite because I always say, like, start with the episode 1 of the latest season. Don't go back until you know you like it, because we're always getting better. Like, the audio quality gets better. We get more experienced. The editing is tighter. Like, I believe that about my own work, even though I don't believe other people when they say that about their work. So, hypocrite that I am. I really want you to be able to just jump into the latest season is my thought on this thing. So, how did we get to the season 11 setting? If my memory serves, we actually reversed at one point. I think I was going to do a dry and you were going to do wet, is how I recall. Do you remember this?
So, listeners, I will have so much more to say on the making of season 11 when we get to the end. Because my version of this season has gone through so many iterations. There may have been one where I was underwater. I truly don't remember. I have like notes prepared that I worked on that I threw to the side about 4 different times as you were like, hold on, actually, what if we did this? I even remember when you tried to last minute pivot it to pirate season, you fuck. I was there. You tried to Shanghai the entire team to go with pirate season. But I think I might have at one point been the set to do the underwater side of things.
Yeah, this is just something about my style. It's highly improvisational. I will change my mind constantly. The name of the season completely changed like 4 times, once after we had already recorded a couple episodes. So that's just, you normally don't hear or like know about that because I'm the only DM and it's just hidden from you. But when you're working with me, unfortunately, it is a constant barrage of that stuff. But that's just how I work. That's why I feel, if I may compliment myself, why I'm so flexible in the actual session, just because I have 4 ideas already. And then when someone latches on, I'll just go that way because I already had that idea, So, but yeah, I'm difficult to work with, but I think it's.
I disagree. I hope that didn't come across as me saying you're difficult to work with. It's more along the lines of I have so much to share to know how differently this season looked, like 8 months ago, 6 months ago, 4 months ago, and again like 2 weeks before the season started. We were like, "What about we just watched One Piece?" And you were like, "Pirate season."
To be clear, Pirate Season is definitely still happening.
Yeah.
It's on the schedule. I have up to season 20 penciled in. So I'm full of ideas. I have a brain disease. I never stop creating. Every day I come up with 5 characters, and they all have silly little voices and weird backstories. That's just a never-ending font for me. So don't get it twisted. Pirates are coming. But yeah, so we were suggested by the end of season 9, which is like create an area we can play in. And the players created a plant island on an ocean. Is that like the simplest explanation?
Yeah, there was a place for plants that plants could thrive. That was meant to be very relaxed and chill. There are a lot of extra elements that some are going to appear in the season, some won't. Simply just due to the fact that like there's only so much time. But it was generally like a place of plants that rests above an ocean. Everything on this island is made of plants. The animals are plants, and there is like a low level of consciousness to everything as well. Like this is quite literally a living island.
Yeah, and I especially thought of you, Quinn, because you are famously an island lover. You're a big island stan. Lost is, of course, your favorite piece of media. So when I was like, who could double DM Island season? You were my first choice automatically. But we don't use every element we set up there. I want to say there are no returning characters, and it's been long enough that everyone, I think, is dead. So don't worry about that stuff. Like I said, in order to keep everything standalone, it's not a direct sequel. It's a as suggested by. So I think Ocean, Island, and Riddlesnake are the only like capital L, lore we're taking.
Yeah, I mean that was the important thing to consider as I designed my half of it, is that I am responding to what previous players decided, because that was the whole point of that season, was to get to the end of the world and then design what your domain is going to be, create your piece of the world. So it was responding to that, but also then acknowledging that this has to be approached in a way where if you've never listened to season 9, you don't have to. You don't have to go back and be like, all right, let me listen to this and find out why everything is the way it is. Because ultimately the reason is just like the players decided it was thematically relevant to them. So it's pretty simple in like sort of agnostic sense of like it's an island of all plants, and it has the ability to kind of interact a little bit with something that's under the water that's very significant and poses kind of the main reason for why this place exists.
Yeah, so Island Season is kind of the first thought I had, and Underwater Season is something people have asked for a while, so those felt pretty obvious for the double DM half and half. Then came the thing that I've lost the most sleep about, which is how should the parties interact? Should they interact? And this has been a whole huge snafu. We've done one downtime so far. I think it went pretty well, but this is kind of an experimental element of the season, is that for 8 seasons in a row, basically everything but the first season, we had these downtimes that, I mean, the game doesn't really prescribe downtime, in earlier editions in D&D, there was actually like property management elements. I don't know if you've ever seen any of these early D&D books, Quinn, where we're like, buy an estate and hire peasants to work your land. It's like completely weird stuff no one does. But my downtime is pretty regimented, where it's like, talk to an NPC, get an upgrade, advance your personal quests, stuff like that. I'm kind of doing something weird with it. What do you want to say about that right now? Because it's going to be a month before they hear it, but it's important because of something it did geographically to your island.
I think we kind of led into it with that, so I don't think we need to really bury the lead here in that. The way we are going to approach downtimes this season is, instead of it being two separate downtimes, a Team A and a Team B downtime with their respective DMs, all of us are going to interact with one another. Maybe not in one gigantic phone call, because those can get tedious, but the idea is we will sort of alternate players from each team interact with one another and kind of expanding their storylines that way. And we as DMs will kind of be along to help kind of provide some guidance along with that, and then create sort of the bookend structure around which these scenes will take place. So it'll be a joint downtime, essentially, and you'll get to see characters specifically interact with each other. That'll be the meat and potatoes of the downtimes.
Yeah, and there was a lot of contemplation, a lot of go back and forth about whether they should be a rotating schedule, which is to say, like, is every downtime my character and Skitch's character, or do I have one with Skitch and one with Laura and one with you and one with Sarah? Right now, I think we're going to do the latter, just to get kind of a mix, but like there's, I think, positives and negatives to each approach, and I think that's interesting. We'll see how it's received, but if people are like, I like that, having two downtimes one for each team, we'll just go back to that. It's fine. I'm not like married to this idea, but I was curious about the pace. Having two downtimes is a lot of not fighting big monsters, which presumably some people listen to D&D podcasts to hear. So I'm curious about that, and also if people like player character to player character conversations more than player character to NPC. I have fun playing the NPCs, but people are always saying like, what does Trizzy think about Buford or whatever? And it's like, oh, they did eventually get some scenes, but like, what does Trizzy think about Max? I'm using last season because it's the freshest in my mind, but like, I don't know what Trizzy's opinions are of Max because they did not talk enough,
Yeah. I think it's going to be a very interesting experiment. It'll be a way to get characters to interact, and as a DM, I place a particular focus on trying to make sure players feel realized in their character. So in that way, I think this is a very good opportunity, because oftentimes, particularly with the way Dice Funk functions as a radio play show, there are challenges where sometimes you may not feel like you can get the spotlight all the time, or you may not feel like you're able to fully realize certain things about your character. So the idea of saying like, hey, your two characters are going to interact, and that's just the scene, that is the content of this episode, does just provide an opportunity to explore your characters. We've done one of these so far, and I feel like everyone really got to explore an aspect of their character, which is very nice. There might be some people who at the end of the season will say like, oh, I wish we could have spent more time with NPCs. And I am trying to like find a way as a DM to make sure, like, knowing like, oh, downtimes were like a space where NPCs got to be focused on. So let me try to like integrate them as much as I possibly can. Otherwise, just so people don't feel like they're missing out or anything like that. But I do think this is a great opportunity. And I say this even as a player, to just be able to role play with the character, which is one of my favorite things to do in this game. Just get to interact with somebody and be like, hey, here's what my character's like. Here's what yours is. Here are the things they definitely would like be super cool on. And then like, here are the things they're not. So like, do we want to have them like have friction? Like, that's like an important question to ask. That's kind of fun. And in the first episode, we have like a gamut of like some people who are like, hey, we're best friends, and let's talk about how we're such great friends with each other. And then there's two characters to like pass in like a hallway, and you're like, you piece of shit. Like, well, fuck you, you jerk.
Yeah, I will say that my first downtime, I was surprised the direction my character went in. I did not know she was going to say some of the things she said. which has been very exciting. But yeah, as far as these downtimes go, I think we're burying the lead about an element I've been really excited about, which is the connection between the island and the ocean. I'm trying to remember who came up with this or how exactly this all came together. I think Skitch named it because it's a building, it's a hotel that goes through the island into the ocean. What is your memory of our creation of this?
So this is, I believe, an aspect left over from one of the great many sort of redirections that you proposed. There was, some people might remember if you listened to a lot of Dice Funk, there was like a post-mortem where we talked about how I had an idea about like sort of like a haunted hotel that would, I was going to do as like a radio play. We were considering like if there was like a Patreon goal, maybe making it like a sideshow of Dice Funk that was going to be like half scripted, half improv and stuff like that. And it doesn't feel like that's going to necessarily happen, but you were like, hey, what if we take that idea? Like, why don't we do like Grand Budapest Hotel on the top half? And it's just like, it's interacting with the people who are waiting to get their loved ones revived, stuff like that. And, I explored that idea for a while, and they were like, actually, I think I have an even better idea. But the hotel stayed. Like, once you introduced that concept to the grand idea, the hotel was just a permanent fixture from then forward. And it is continued. This idea that there is a centralized location, and both teams interact with it in different ways. There is sort of like not a class identity, because this island very specifically kind of has no culture to it. So there are not like a culture that we would understand. It's all plants. They have their own thing. But that's, the top side is like made to look very nice and be this like comfortable place for people to stay. And the bottom side is like a rough and tumble Wild West kind of spot, because it's more cowboy like down at the bottom.
Yeah, because I think at the beginning when I was thinking of island, and I think maybe I was going to do topside, I was thinking of it as like a Florida resort. So I've been trying to do Florida season for a while. And so hotels on the beach are a huge, important part of the economy and the culture. So I think that's where that idea started. And then I was thinking, the under the water would be hard to maintain, and there'd be like rust and corrosion and barnacles, and that had a more dark and dirty feel. And I said, what if it was like the Gem from Deadwood, one of the greatest TV shows ever made? And then I was like, something that sounds like Gem. And then I think Skitch said the Gig, which is obviously same amount of letters, starts with a G, because gigs are it's a method of fishing where you impale something with a sharp spear, which fits the visual of the hotel piercing the plant island into the ocean. And it also works with the idea of like the gig economy, going on missions, which is what D&D is about. So we worked on like 6 different levels. It's very, if I do say so, clever. But yeah. I think in the first episode, Sarah yells, "Sweet Life of Zack and Cody season, let's go." And Dan and I both are intimately familiar with hotels. I lived in one for a long time, and Dan's father, I believe, ran one for a while. We talked about that some in this show, but so in a way, it's like island season, but also hotel season, which is our elements I'm very excited about.
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot of really cool things here. It's interesting to me because some ways that our minds work is to like categorize things into like particular flavors of fantasy. There are ways you could do that for, previous seasons of Dice Funk, and also just media in general. Like there's very specific things of like, what about cowboy season? What about, pirate world? What about, Robot Land, all this sort of thing that like video games and like fantasy fiction is just done to our brains. I think it is very interesting because Hotel World is not particularly like a flavor of fantasy you would see explored very much. And I think it's cool to get an opportunity to explore this particular very interesting culture that exists on this island, and its particular connection to the well down below, which was an element introduced at the end of season 9 that can revive people, and how it connects to everything, and how people
exist on this island. It is something that even just now, like kind of as we're recording this has been sort of the topic of an episode recently of just people kind of being like, wait, so how does this process exactly work? Like, I want to know more about this. I need to figure it out. It's actually very funny because Dan realized halfway through it's become a very personal real life thing for him, like his ticket queue at work that just keeps getting longer and longer. He's like, no, there needs to be streamlines to this process.
Yeah, he was getting too much realness from his day job in the episode. But I think they're thinking about the genre space a lot, because sometimes it's a very relatable thing. Like last season was like, a space adventure. We've all seen space adventures. And, and later we're going to do pumpkin season, which is like, spooky adventures, Nightmare Before Christmas kind of stuff. I feel like that's pretty relatable. This season, though, it's pretty hard to nail down. There aren't a lot of things like what we're doing. In fact, on the latest Spew Punk, which is our subscriber-only podcast where we talk about movies and video games and books and stuff, you mentioned there's an X-Men storyline that was eerily similar, and that's like the first piece of media that I had heard of that's really kind of trying to do what we're doing. Can you give us quickly what that was?
Yeah, I mentioned that there is a storyline in the X-Men comic books right now called the Krakoan Saga, I guess you would call it, the Krakoan Age. It's basically where all the mutants decide to fuck off from humanity, and they get together on this, like, living island, and they use their mutant powers together to, like, basically create a resurrection process so people can keep coming back, and they're creating essentially a super society using their powers. They're going to try to integrate themselves as like a global world power with sovereignty and independence. But there's also kind of like cult-like aspects to it. There's people who don't like that this is happening within the community, or don't like the way certain directions are being taken and things like that. There's a lot of good storylines. I always kind of feel the need to pull back when I talk comic books, because we all know how crazy they can get, and not everything from this timeline is like a work of art. But I found it to be a very interesting exploration of like a time and place for mutants within this comic book universe, and that was an inspiration I took into the season. Not exactly, as I said, I'll talk more about where sort of my tones and vibes fluctuated as we kind of get maybe closer to the end or straight up the end of the season. But the Krakoan Age of X-Men was an inspiration for how I built my side of this story.
Yeah, I'd only just heard of it, but it does sound really inspiring and interesting and similar to what we're doing. So that's like one of the only guiding stars. I kind of joke in the first couple episodes about, Psychonauts and Silent Hill as influences. I don't know if you want to give, more of the premise away, but we're doing things that have a little bit of precedent, but also like this is a pretty out there season, so it's kind of why I wanted to do this episode. My side, the underwater stuff, is more traditional D&D, but it's also a very untraditional setting. I've had to do a lot of research about ocean life and about how it's plants and animals work and all that stuff. Do you know plankton is not just one thing? Plankton is like an umbrella term for like a ton of different shit.
Oh yeah, it's like whole colonies and stuff like that too, isn't it?
It just means like a bunch of little stuff. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. And also like seaweed is not a plant. What the fuck? What do you mean? It's a weed. It's a weed in the sea. No, bitch, it's not.
Wait, is it a creature?
It's just a organism. It's a different kind of organism.
Okay.
But yeah, shit like that. I've had to learn.
Yeah, well, I don't want to like turn the direction or anything like that, but I do want to talk a little bit about the underwater side of things, which I think is very interesting, because underwater season is something that people have asked for. It's also like a flavor that just exists in fantasy media. There's going to be an underwater plane in Magic the Gathering eventually. There have been underwater zones in World of Warcraft. Like, people like the flavor and fantasy of underwater. One of the major heroes in the DC universe is entirely an underwater themed character. Like, it's just a flavor that people like. But you are definitely going in on like, all right, so this is an underwater season. That'll change how everything works. Because I know, like, one of my character's weapons, you like message me, you're like, this just won't work underwater, right? So like, I had to be like, shit, I actually had to change my weapon to make sure it's something that, like, if I do this underwater, it actually makes sense to some degree.
Yeah, I've been trying to be, permissive about it. So like, hasn't come up directly, but I'm like, if you want to use like a lightning or a fire spell, that's obviously going to be different. So think about how that flavor would change. And I think, as you said, like bludgeoning weapons, like just moving against the force of the water, is not going to really do much. So this is really a piercing damage kind of environment. And I was interested to see what the response is, because I feel like maybe underwater season is something we can revisit. I don't know if there is like multiple seasons in it, but there is a lot. There's a lot of plants, there's a lot of animals, there's a lot of micro environments and geological features. I've had a lot of fun with it. So I've really been having a lot of fun. And I think that I want to make it different enough that it just doesn't feel like a normal campaign where occasionally you describe things as being wet. That was like my main fear, is that like this is just a regular campaign but we're picturing water sometimes. So I hope I capture that. But like as we've alluded to a couple times, one of the other elements from season 9 that was suggested was the Well of Resurrection, kind of like the Lazarus pits from DC Comics, if we're bringing comics back in, just a thing that can revive people. And that's kind of what the underwater economy runs around, is like, oh, this is the only place that resurrection magic works. How would that affect people trying to live there? So that's kind of what they're dealing with, as well as other hydrothermal vents like that spit up stuff out of the ground. So I've been reading a lot about that. It's very interesting. But if you've listened to the show a long time, you know I don't particularly care for resurrection magic. I think Dungeons and Dragons works as a game perfectly fine if you want to just crunch the math, if you're just trying to play, Dark Souls with it or whatever. But as a storytelling vehicle, it really, for my money at least, kind of takes the air out of a lot of things if you can pop people back up at any time. So I'm really trying to think if this is going to be an ongoing feature in our world. What does it mean? Stuff like that. So I like playing with these elements, and I genuinely don't know where it's going to go. Like I say this all the time, but like who the fuck knows what these players are going to unleash on me and each other. So we can't plan too far in the future.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there. There are a lot of interesting rules to the way that the underwater world works, and that is all specifically, I believe, stuff established by the players at the end of season 9. So if people are like, so why does it work this way? Like, because somebody said it did. So just so you know, that's how this works. And Austin came up with a creative way to then tie in what the stakes are above to all of this. Which, I don't think we need to hide this. We've kind of alluded to it, especially with Psychonauts earlier. There is a concept that there is a process on the above side where you can see into a person's I think vibe is just the word we've settled on, their energy, their ennui, their whatever term you want to use. You can look inside of themselves and sort of get to experience sort of an astral simulacrum of it. You can experience a portion of life to help determine if this is a person who should be or shouldn't be revived, and that is the main job of the team in the above side, is determining whether or not people should be brought back based off of what they see. And that is the central thesis. That is the question that guides this season. Who do you bring back? Why do you bring them back? Should people be brought back this way? All of this. I intend to explore this question thoroughly, and so far everyone has had a really good time. And it also creates an opportunity for me to explore weird genres that I may not get to otherwise, because I get to create sort of these miniature dungeons that can have any thematic sort of origin that I want them to, because I get to sort of write who's dead and decide until eventually I probably just won't. It's an interesting way that I'm existing in this season.
It's interesting you say dungeons, because I was about to point out precisely that, is that Dice Funk has way fewer dungeons than Dungeons and Dragons would suggest, just because I've always found them kind of strange world building wise. Like in Greyhawk, I believe, the original setting from the 70s, it was like, oh, this is a world in which there are a huge labyrinth of underground caverns. That's just like part of the world, which is fine. But then in Forgotten Realms, there's just dungeons everywhere for some reason. Like, why? who built them for what purpose. It's literally just for the game mechanics, and I've never particularly enjoyed that. But when we fit a dungeon in where we can, where it makes sense, and I think the kind of Psychonauts mechanic where you can open up someone's spirit and walk around in it is a perfect segue into those mechanics. I mean, honestly, part of the reason I suggested Psychonauts-like mechanics is just I know Sarah is a big fan of Psychonauts, and she doesn't get to be on the show that often, so I thought it'd be fun for her. But also, I think it's really cool that you can do different genres and different things. Persona 5 also has a very similar vibe where you're going into people's mind palace. So, like, there's a little bit of genre space there where where characters are locations, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Very, very, very good fertile soil for adventure.
Yeah, it's an interesting space. Everything is kind of ill-defined. You get to kind of create it as you want. And narratively, it creates a lot of interesting space just to exist. I won't give specific examples, but I imagine if you're listening, you might be able to think of some stuff that you're like, oh, well, what if this happens? Will they be able to explore that? And the answer is maybe. I truly, I have like a timeline of stuff that I plan to do. But I have kind of built the campaign in a way where I'm fully accepting of the fact that, like, at any point in time, things could go off the rails and just go in a completely different direction. And I'm ready to, kind of duck and weave with that.
Yeah, we don't have any finale planned. We didn't last season either with the double DM with Laura. I mean, as you know, if you've listened to that season, eventually the teams merged because two characters had pretty natural exits and it just made sense. This season, no idea if that's going to happen, So Quinn and I both have some arcs in mind and we'll see where it goes. But this is not a kind of thing where it's like, okay, we just need to fill time until we get to, the event or whatever. So
yeah.
That's exciting. Like, I know for pumpkin season, Dan and I have been talking. I think we talked about this in that one post-mortem, the pumpkin perspective it was called, where it's like, oh, you want to do this kingdom of fear, and I'll do like a kingdom of courage or something, and maybe there'll be enemies. Like, that's, who knows where that one's going to go, but that's like a more defined relationship. Here in season 11, it's like there's above ground people or above water people and below water people. They're up to their own stuff. They meet every once in a while, but friends, enemies, just neighbors, I literally don't know. And I've tried to avoid some of the tropes of underwater stories. Like, we just saw Aquaman, and that is always like super futuristic kingdoms of, gems and the futuristic metals. And every story is about how like the surface dwellers are poisoning the ocean. And there's nothing wrong with an ecological storytelling thing. We've talked before about doing a season where we're like eco-terrorists doing some Captain Planet shit on ultraviolence. But I tried to do the opposite, where it's like this is a pretty sparse, barren underwater community just trying to figure out how to eke out an existence, and their problems are much more personal. So I hope people like a different take. I was just so worried about just doing Aquaman again. that would be bad. Although I did like the scene in Aquaman 2 where they go to the weird crime place and there's a bunch of weird fish. Like, I saw that after we had recorded some stuff, but like, that's the vibe. I'm trying to make weird fish people.
Yeah, and that's the fun, is just being able to do weird stuff. I intentionally, from my side, I kind of just went through the monster manual and like sort of like the tertiary handbooks to be like, what are some creatures we haven't gotten to like do much with? And I was like, okay, here's something, we haven't had this in the show before, we haven't had this. And then there's a couple that I was also like, I really want to do this though. One reason you asked her to DM is you were like, you have so many character ideas. You're constantly telling me about new character ideas. Why don't you be a DM and then you can get some of them? And I have incorporated some of my previous character ideas into characters in this season. So there's, I think, some cool stuff to look forward to there, as you can just get a little wild with it. This is very much sort of a melting pot. The player characters all have sort of like a plant theme to them. But beyond that, it's not like everyone who lives on this island has to be a plant person. In fact, the idea is that there is no real like plant people on this island. It is an island just of plants.
Yeah, this is a thing I talked about in the Discord, like in the pre-production of the season, where I was like, "What are the underwater species in D&D?" And it was like Merfolk and Triton. Merfolk are kind of mermaids with no feet, and Triton have feet. Is the main difference. There's also some things like the Sahagwin. God, I wish I could pronounce any of these words, which are just like evil merfolk essentially, and I kind of settled on there being three main island people and three main underwater people, kind of arranged by size. This was something I talked about with people. It wasn't like a demand from on high. Austin says you must conform to this, but I was thinking that with plant people you have ones that are kind of like people with a little bit of plant, the dryad. There's like a plant person, which are like the leshy, and then there's like trees, the treants. And then underwater, you have the merfolk, the water genasi, who are mostly people. They're like genie kin who can breathe underwater. And then the kuatoa, who are mostly fish with like a little bit of human. And I liked the symmetry of there being kind of three main water and three main plant creatures who fill out the teams. And I think everyone seems really excited about their character. I don't, what's in, maybe everyone's pretending behind my back to make me feel better, but I feel like everyone is really psyched about their, like, Sarah and Dan both have commissioned like a ton of art already.
Yeah, there's some very, very cool things. I'm curious to see what people have in response to once they get to see some of these characters. The above team has a lot of interesting dynamics between them. Your character is a very curious and interesting beast that I think a lot of people will be excited to see. You're putting your whole ostinacy into this one. And the below team is like also just like a very eclectic group of weirdos who have an interesting sort of job and relationship to one another that I think will be fun to see explored.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else we want to say, because we have, the basic premise, island, above and below, dry and wet, resurrection wells, psychonaut stuff. I think that's most of the things that are like in the actual setting. Is there anything else about doing the season or about your process you want to talk about? I feel like Dan is going to be like, okay, here's my slideshow, here's my PowerPoint presentation. So let's set the precedent that that's okay.
So yeah, I mean, I have a huge collection of notes for this season. I am going to be posting my season. So I have everything like right now in a Google Doc. And once the season is done, I will post that Google Doc, or I'll give it to you so you can post it on the Patreon just for anybody to come and grab, just a place where it can easily be hosted. But I also then have just a list of things. So one of the first things I realized when I was like, okay, season 11 is going to be about doing these vibe checks, and they're essentially these dungeons. How do I make these dungeons interesting? So I spent a couple days just coming to mind being like, okay, well, what if it's a dungeon with this to it? Or what if it's a dungeon with this to it? Or what if it's a dungeon that has this element to it? Like I have a giant list of them. And I've just kind of like sporadically taken some of those ideas and sprinkled them in just to like pop up the idea. Because I didn't want to just do something that was like, you guys wander through this person's life and you find out they were sort of an okay person. That's it. Who cares or whatever. I wanted there to be some kind of interesting element to everything. So it was all about kind of trying to find ways to like add unique rules to things, trying to find ways to add unique flavors and settings to things. There's one that you guys are about to step into that I'm very excited to showcase because it's got a flavor to it that I haven't really gotten to explore with before that I'm very interested about. And then I also just have a long list of characters. I do have a naming convention planned for the season. So one part of my notes is just character names potentially. And I made my NPC and then I went through and I decided like, okay, this name fits them, or this name fits them the best. And I still have just a big list of names at this point that, at a moment's notice, I can add and stay to the idea. I have in my notes, I gave all of my NPCs Magic the Gathering color combinations. not intentionally at first. One character I specifically wanted to design with a color combination in mind. I was like, I haven't seen something like this as an antagonist, so I wanted to focus in on that and really zero in. And then I was like, oh, what if I actually use this as a guiding post for all of my NPCs? So that might be a fun thing for people to think about at some point. And then again, all the answers will be at the end. And I guess maybe I should note one previous idea for this season was simply going to be the Fire Force season, and I'll just leave it at that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we both have 10,000 ideas. Like I said, next season, I think Dragon season is going to be a single DM, and then there's Pumpkin season, which is double DM, but I have up to season 20, including some very out there ideas. So I hope you'll join me on this journey. You mentioned before that we talked about like a Patreon goal for doing a sideshow. Not to bring the mood down, but yeah, we didn't quite reach
Times
that.
are tough.
Times are tough. I don't know. I've been doing a lot of soul searching lately. If you listen to our show Spewpunk, I've touched on this briefly, but this is going in the main feed. So, well, first of all, you should subscribe to Spewpunk. It's just $1.
It's huge.
Hundreds of hours of us doing absolute garbage nonsense comedy, mostly about chastity cages and spitting in each other's mouths. But,
Whoa! Only recently.
but we also read a lot of great books, like some stone cold classics, Toni Morrison, Left Hand of Darkness, you know, the stuff that you get a degree for reading if you do it in the right building. Really excited to talk to you about All the Pretty Horses. Holy shit, that book's good. But yeah, the Patreon is such a blessing. It's allowed me to live for years and years at this point. It's great. I did just have my 33rd birthday, so I'm getting older. I have to start thinking about what I'm going to do with my life. If I'm going to settle down, if I'm going to get married, have children, things of this nature. That's not your problem, dear listener. But if you were looking for a sign to subscribe, I will say that I make enough to live as a bachelor in the United States of America, but I don't make enough to have a family. So I'm going to, at some point, have to think about the future of the show. And I want to do 20, 30 seasons of this. I want to do this forever. I love it so much. But I've seen the numbers. If everyone listening just pledged $1, then you would get this show until we're all dead. I can do that. I promise you I can do this at the highest quality possible. But I don't very often ask for this kind of thing. A lot of podcasts I listen to do. They'll have like a sign on and a sign off where they talk about Patreon. Mine, patreon.com/Austin Yorski. I guess I just get embarrassed. I'm always just like, they know, I'm bothering them. But we're about to hit the 10-year anniversary. This show started in 2015, and it's 2024. So for the 10-year anniversary, I'm also thinking about switching up the Patreon. My girlfriend's always giving me a guff about the tiers. She's like, no one knows what Bloody Roar is. It's not that funny.
Oh, man, that's why I subscribed. I was like, I need to make sure I'm going to get a Bloody Roar character.
I mean, I would definitely buy Bloody Roar if Konami sold it to me. But, realistically, I want to know what people want. I will do a podcast every day. I will stream myself 24 hours a day. I do whatever you want.
Okay, stop. Don't make those promises.
I'm just saying. No. Realistically, right now we do Dice Funk, which is the role-playing show, and we do Spewpunk, which is a variety show, a comedy media thing. Is there something else people want? I'm interested in that. Also, I'm thinking about redoing the credits. So right now the credits are, we get two nerds to read the backers of the show, and it's fun. There's a lot of inside jokes. People talk about my pussy. There's the Spookmaster General. There's trying to bribe me to kill the solitaire, things of that nature. But
someone spit in my mouth recently and called me a bad girl.
That's the opposite
like
of what
a
you want.
bad girl. Yeah, that's fucking bullshit. I let someone spit in my mouth and I don't get praised for it.
Yeah,
It's nonsense.
Sorry, Quinn. I feel like everyone owes you an apology for letting this happen. We should have protected you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been thinking about doing something else with that show. Just maybe I've been like listening to kind of podcasts where it's just one person. Usually I like multiple people. You get the banter, the back and forth, the inside jokes. But like, I don't know if you know Jeff Gerstmann. He used to work for GameSpot and Giant Bomb. Now he just does the Jeff Gerstmann show. It's just him. You know, there's history podcasts I like. So like Age of Napoleon or Revolutions, where it's just one person talking about history. So I was thinking about like, what if I just do something like that? And I I can work the credits into it. The thing is, it's like 400 names, so it'd be pretty difficult to do a lot of content. So I've been thinking about changing up those tiers. I won't bore you too much longer with this. Just these are thoughts I'm having, and they've only ever been on the subscriber feed. So I'll say, I think when the 10th anniversary of the show was coming up, the tiers might go up. I've never changed them. I've been podcasting since 2011, 2010. So I think right now it's like $5 to get in the credits. I think I might do 10. Let me know if that's insane, if I'm stupid and evil. I don't know. That's a thought I've had, but I'm becoming older and crusty, and these are the things that keep me awake at night when I should be thinking up silly voices for crab people. You should see the folder of crabs I have on my computer.
So many crabs.
I think there's a lot of interesting things that can be explored. I know some people just have interest in the process. That's why one of the things I want to do is release my notes at the end of the season in a digital format so people can look through them. That's like the number one question every season is like, what would have happened if this happened? And I don't have that answer for everything, but there's some things that you guys have already done that's completely different from what I intended. And there will be notes, that are like, here's what would have happened there or whatever, or at least like, this is what my original intention was. Maybe something like that is something that would be interesting. I don't know if people want like post episode, like like the fucking Talking Dead for episodes and stuff like that. But like even just like, hey, I have a giant folder of character ideas, or helping to design an NPC. I have no idea, but there's a lot of stuff that's out there. So if there are concepts that you're like, ooh, that actually does intrigue me a lot as a listener or someone who wants to contribute creatively along with financially or something like that, sure, I'll have Hoffman Ford's barn or whatever. Like, get your dealership right now. It's the Toyota-thon. It's a second level spell slot.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think a world building show, talking about the process and all that could be interesting. I'd probably go back and do each previous season and then start doing new stuff to get people like, oh, here's what I'm thinking about dragons and so forth.
I was going to say, it's very interesting because at this point, we're already prepared for season 12. I was going to talk to you actually about season 12 after we finish this call. That could be something if people want. If I've built this character for, I've had them more or less kind of done. I still need to do a lot because there's a lot of things left undecided. But like this concept has kind of been in the banks now for like 6 months or something like that. So there could just be a thing where people do episodes of like, hey, this is me talking about the creation process of this character, how I got to it, maybe with someone else, maybe just them themselves, whatever it might be. And then that could be something released or whatever. This is sort of, I guess, going away from session 0 and becoming more of a Patreon pitch hour. But these are ideas that are just going to be thrown out there, and people can respond to them being like, ooh, I like this one, or I didn't like this one, or hey, give me that one.
Yeah, listen, I'm not too good to make Joseph Tombrello the Dragonborn wizard if that's what's gonna get, if that's what's gonna let me have a child. we all gotta live somehow. But what I would never do is like sell like the narrative, if that makes sense. I'd never be like, you have to, I will give you money to kill this character or whatever. Like that's the Dice's job. I don't fuck with that. That's bad vibes. Just try to get in the way of the random chance.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool things that I think we could do. And if people have something that seems interesting to them, let us know. And we could potentially find a way to make it happen.
Yeah, so I think we're about at the end here. There's probably more we could talk about, but we can also do that on Spewpunk. Currently just $1. It's a great show, so listen to that. Next week, episode 1 of season 11. We've gotten this far without saying the name of it, which is very funny. But before we end on that, do you have any thoughts about the music? Because people often ask me about the music on the show. I only use things that are like Creative Commons licensed. So like Overclocked Remix is a video game music remix place that allows you to use their stuff for non-commercial purposes. And Nine Inch Nails released 2 albums into the Creative Commons, so I've been minding that. But you're kind of in charge of the season. You're the first DM, and you're kind of setting the tone. Do you want to tell them anything about that?
So I don't have the massive amount of resources
or knowledge that you have to music. So if you had asked me, I'd have been like, oh, Time Splitters. But you know me. You're a very, very good friend. So you've listened to what I've said over the years, and you identified, because I thematically think water stages are the coolest stages in any fucking game. Like, everyone shits on Vashir in Cataclysm in World of Warcraft, and I'm like, nah, I always quest through Vashir. I know it fucking sucks. I don't care. Atlantis, the controls are dog shit. I don't care. Best level in Kingdom Hearts 1. All these water stages, I love them. So usually the music has a profound impact. So there's two songs that you have. One is, I believe people got to hear it at the end of the last post-mortem, which is a track from one of my favorite video games ever, Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And then there's a second track. You basically asked me, you're like, which one of these would you like? And I was like, both of these are good. Do this one for a normal ass episode, and then when shit gets real, do this one.
Yeah, so you're gonna hear that, and the water side has more of a Western feel. So I got some harmonica and some banjo stuff in there for the Sonic palette. But yeah, that literally, I just think to myself of all the tens of thousands of songs I've heard before, and somehow I have memorized what would fit here. And I also, of course, my friend Rachel Hillman has done music for the show, so there's things like that. But this one was immediately like, I got to do something for Quinn. It's got to be Sonic the motherfucking Hedgehog, you know what it is, which you've probably heard. That's probably how this episode opens. So
yeah, it's the best track in all of Sonic the Hedgehog, Hydra City. I don't want to fight you. I will lose, but I will, if you try to argue otherwise, cry. So,
will you fight me if I pronounce it Hydrocity?
No, because it's not how it would be pronounced. They did this entire bit in the Sonic the Hedgehog comics. It's already been done. All right, I'm carrying on past you. I'm not giving you time to breathe, you nerd.
Damn. I really need to start reading comics. I'm getting fucking owned.
Yeah, left and right. So yeah, there's cool stuff that is definitely going to be coming. I guess the last thought I want to reiterate is, I incorporate a lot of what season 9 players sort of put out there, and the idea of like kind of comfy vibes with moral consequences is a bit of the tone that I'm going for this season. So stay tuned. Look forward to it. Next episode, I think, should be next week, unless there's another surprise episode or something like that. And be gentle. I'm so fragile. I will explode if you're mean to me, legally and scientifically.
Yeah, you're wearing that jacket, or like the service dog jacket. Please do not approach. I'm so scared.
Only approach if you're gonna spit in my mouth and then call me a good girl, because like I can't take the tension otherwise.
Oh my god. I will say for the season name, because in episode 1, we do not say what the season is named, which is very funny to me. I was thinking because of the hydrothermal vents, that one of the things that comes out of the vents is sulfur. The Italian word for sulfur is zolfo. I know this because there's a place in Florida called Zolfo Springs, which is a big inspiration for me. Once again, I was thinking Florida vibes, and we just this is coming off of Arabella, so I thought it'd be fun to go from A to Z. But then we never said that on this show. But what we do talk a lot about in episode 1 is the banyan tree, and I thought going from A to B, Arabella to banyan, was fun. And also, it's a word we say on the show. So literally after we had already recorded, I changed the name of the season to Banyan. It's still the location of the thing. The island doesn't have a name. This is important, Quinn. I asked you this on air, but
yes.
You never named the island. But the underwater town does have a name.
Yeah, it is very specific. I imagine it'll come up at some point. A character in the world will ask, like, why doesn't this place have a name? And it might be explored at some point. But I have been adamant that this island does not have a name.
Oh boy. But yeah, the banyan tree is a big element. It's the whole Psychonauts persona, Silent Hill thing. So the season 11 is called Banyan. At as far as I know, I believe all those graphics have been made at the marketing team. They're telling me, they're whispering right now that it's called Banyan. Thank you, Bjork, the Siamese cat, my marketing team. Thank you very much. The underwater town is called Zolfo. We'll have a future season with the letter Z. I don't know why I'm so fixated on this. Dan is doing pumpkin season, and I was like, what's the name? name? And he was like, I don't know, spooky? And I was like, the place isn't spooky. The naming convention is the location that the campaign takes place. And also, we've never repeated a letter. So please take that into consideration. I'm sorry, I'm insane. This doesn't matter. No one cares. But I'm trying to go alphabetical now because of my mental illness.
Yeah. So that's the new direction, everybody. Get ready for next season. Cookies.
Well, that's not bad. I'll write that down. The Cookies Mountains where the dragons live. Cookies.
Oh man, hold on, Austin. I know I had a previous idea for a character. Can I be a cookie monster dragon who just flies around eating cookies? Oh man, I have the character sheet. I'm willing to fucking burn it to the ground right now to be a cookie monster dragon. For the love of God, please.